All right, welcome to the Six Lessons podcast. This is episode 8 in season 3, and we're going to talk a little bit about manufacturing dental products. Manufacturing dental products is something that I have no expertise in, but every one of us who use products require some confidence in the quality control that the products are being developed under. But the product that we sell in Six Lessons is not a material. We recommend materials, but we can make any materials from any company work with the right techniques. Let me just give you a personal example of how I came in contact with one company that I've worked with. That company is Ultradent, and Ultradent is in the same city that I've lived in for 38 years, South Jordan, Utah. But how did I meet Dan Fisher, who is the founder and president? When I graduated from dental school in 1978, the dentist who inspired me actually to be a dentist, who I met when I was in 10th grade. So in 10th grade, I go to this graduation dental school, and I met Bob Heath. Fast forward, I go to pre-dental school at Brigham Young University, get accepted to dental school at University of Pacific, finish my 3 years. Now I'm a dentist. And so I have to always think, well, what next? And my parents at this time were living in San Diego, California, the city of my birth, where I was born. And my wife, Linda, and 3 of our children, 2 of which were born in dental school, traveled to San Diego and visited my parents. And as we were traveling back, we stopped in Lompoc, California, where Bob Heath was practicing dentistry. I went to his office and watched him practice. And I got some ideas about dental products. For example, in Northern California, a small company that nobody had ever heard of called Denmat was manufacturing some of the first adhesive products really in the world. But Denmat hired a young dentist who had some skills in chemistry and was a practicing dentist, and his name was John Kanka III. And John Kanka worked for Denmat as a scientific dentist advisor on products and adhesive dentistry particularly. He had early in his career connected with Takao Fusuyama, just like Ray Bertolotti early in his career teaching connected with Takao Fusuyama. So John Kanka and Ray Bertolotti were really the only 2 dentists in the United States that knew personally Takao Fusuyama. 1998, I met John Kanka for the first time at the ADA convention, and he was not at that time working for the company Denmat that my first inspiration for dentistry, Bob Heath, was using their products. Now, you're just coming out of dental school. You don't know anything about dental products. You're just like, you're in dental school. They say, use this, you use that. I mean, that's, why would a dental school give you anything but the best to fix teeth with, right? You have no idea of any type of evolution, any type of history, any type of going forward or backward in product selection or product applications. All these things I'm getting introduced to just as I'm graduated from dental school. But the real thing I'm worried about is, what do I do next? Now, after I graduated, I was committed for 3 years in the Navy. And so I knew I was going to be practicing wherever the Navy assigned me for 3 years. I did that. But Bob Heath gave me a name of a doctor that he had as an associate. That's usually what happens when you come out of dental school and you go into a practice. You don't know anything. You don't have any real capital resources to borrow money to start a practice. Another whole challenge. But my friend, Dr. Heath, my first kind of inspiration, says, when you get out of the Navy, if you're planning to go back to Utah, that was kind of our plan because my wife is from Utah. He said, look up my friend Roger Hicks. He practiced with me in Lompoc for 3 years, and then he decided to go back to Salt Lake, where he was from, and practice. As soon as I got out of the Navy, we moved back to Utah. I contacted Roger Hicks and used the name. I said, I'm kind of a cousin of Bob Heath. But anyway, Roger, nice guy. He was associated with the Utah Dental Association in some leadership position. We went to a few dinners together with the Utah Dental Association, but he offered me a part-time job, a couple of days a week in his practice while I decided what to do in Utah as far as practicing dentistry. So for about a year, I practiced with Roger Hicks in this office in the middle of the Utah Salt Lake Valley. There were several dentists in this complex, and the office right across or right next door to Roger Hicks was Dr. Dan Fisher. Just said Dan Fisher, DDS. Didn't think anything about it, but as I got to know Roger and he got to know, obviously he knew Dan because Dan had started his practice there 3 years before, we started to use a product because at that time, of course, I was doing crown preparations because crown preparations were all I knew. But when you do a crown preparation, quite often you have a problem with bleeding of the gingiva, especially in deep margins underneath crowns. Packing cord is obviously the first thing that was taught, but you also have the idea of a hemostatic agent. And so Dan Fisher had an idea, and he said, instead of dabbing on this hemostatic agent that gets on the gum tissue, kind of slops around. If the patient tastes it, it's the bitterest thing they've ever tasted. It can actually damage tissue. Anyway, these hemostatic agents, very caustic. But Dan Fisher said, how about if I made a little syringe and I had a little brush tip on the end, and then you could just put that hemostatic agent exactly where the bleeding is. It was an innovation for this traditional crown and bridge problem. And Roger was telling me this story because these hemostatic syringes that Roger had weren't for sale. We only have these because Dan Fisher makes these in his kitchen, but he is getting ready to go to market. And then in the next few years, bleaching of vital teeth became important. But again, the problem of these bleaching materials, how to contain these bleaching materials because they were liquid, it was very hard to contain them and keep them on the teeth. Again, Dan Fisher, very bright person, had an innovation. And the innovation was, I'm going to make a gel form of this bleaching material. It's called opalescence. It became his major cash cow. But anyway, that's kind of the first introduction to Ultradent products, and then Dan Fisher. And then over the years at different meetings, we would meet each other, and he gave me permission to use his library because he did have a library at Ultradent. I used the library at Ultradent for probably 2 years. I visited it every day. And so when I became imbued with the idea that science was the way forward in adhesive dentistry, Ray Bertolotti gave me the beginning ideas of the references and the bibliography. And then Ray Bertolotti did me a huge favor, and this was, not requested by me, but every company, large and small in dental manufacturing, have what are called key opinion leader meetings. Key opinion leaders are very important to product manufacturers because if somebody on the stage mentions a product, the chances of that product being purchased increase exponentially. And so these meetings are very important, but myself, I had been teaching 6 lessons for a couple of years. 2003, Ray Bertolotti got trained by us in 2004. And then 2005, we had a key opinion leader meeting at Ultradent. I was not invited until Ray Bertolotti told Dan Fisher that he should invite me. But it was the first one that I had ever been invited to. Met a lot of important key opinion leaders that are still in the Biomimetic community. Mark Malterud, probably the biggest one. Richard Trkowski from New York is another one we're still in contact with. Dan Fisher, when he started his company, he was involved with the early connections with Denmat, John Kank III, Ray Bertolotti. John Kank III eventually made his own company called Apex, and Ray Bertolotti made his own company. It was called Danville. And here is a key opinion leader meeting by Danville that I was invited to in 2008. But all of these people are important in some type of practicing, teaching, manufacturing, or research in the dental world. But the company would love you to just say, only Danville products work, or only Ultradent products work, or only Courare products work. Or only Bisco products work, or at least they would say, these are the best. I mean, that's what every manufacturer wants every key opinion leader to say. Whew. Now, that's an area of ethics among key opinion leaders, ethics among scientists, ethics among practitioners. As 6 lessons grew, I had been invited from Dan Fisher's key opinion leaders to being able to use his library whenever I wanted to. And for 2 years, I was probably there every day for at least 1 or 2 hours for 2 years. But as we started to grow the idea of biomimetics, we wanted to start having conferences. And conferences are usually sponsored by manufacturers. The conferences, statewide, nationwide, really go from year to year from the support of the people who are selling in the conference. But anyway, we wanted to do a conference on biomimetic dentistry. Actually, Pascal Magnier in his office said, Dave, I want you to do something. I think it would be important. And of course, Pascal had a pretty big reputation. I didn't have a reputation that big in 2007. Been teaching 6 lessons for 4 years. Ray Bertolotti, obviously, was giving me some support. Other people like Dan Fisher giving me some support. But in the western part of the United States, I had some status as a key opinion leader because we had started to publish some articles, first with Ray Bertolotti, and then with Simone Della Peri, and then with Pascal Magnier. But all of this process of getting known and establishing your position as a key opinion leader, well, at some point, the key opinion leaders, if they want to have a conference, if they believe that their information is so important that it needs to be promoted in a separate conference, which I did, then I said, okay, Pascal, I think that's a great idea. But he was the speaker at the first Biomimetic conference in 2011. We had already had some small Biomimetic conferences here in Utah in 2008, 2009. We brought out Simone Della Peri. But for basically 2 years, Davey and I worked on this conference. But when I was talking to Dan Fisher in his office, this was in 2008, when we started this planning for this conference, I went to visit him in his office on behalf of this organizing committee of Pascal Magnier, Ray Bertolotti, myself for the Biomimetic conference. And then afterwards, he wrote a little article in an advertising journal that's called Dental Town. It's a journal that John Kanko was associated with for many, many years as their kind of expert in the world of dentistry. Dan Fisher knows some things about adhesive dentistry. And in this article, this is what he said. Over time, dentists will continue to hear about the importance of mimicking the natural. That's the title. Mimicking nature. Strive to mimic the natural. So I introduced Dan Fisher to the concept of biomimetics, and next thing you know, he's writing an article on biomimetics. And he says, over time, dentists will continue to hear about the importance of mimicking the natural. Some, like Bertolotti, Magnier, and Alleman, have even come up with a nice-sounding name for it, biomimetics, which means mimicking the natural. Why did Pascal Magnier, Ray Bertolotti, and Dave Alleman decide to use the word biomimetics? We were in Pascal Magnier's office, USC. We're in the office. We're trying to figure out, okay, this conference, we believe that these advances in adhesive dentistry are so significant, you have to learn them in a very systematic way. And the systematic way that I have is called 6 lessons. Other teachers of biomimetic dentistry might call that something else. Now, Ray Bertolotti, you have been talking a lot about tooth-conserving dentistry. That's the phrase I learned from you, 1995. Very appealing idea. Phrase that I used 4 years before this meeting. This meeting was in 2007. The phrase I used was advanced adhesive dentistry. And Pascal's word was biomimetic because he had put that in the title of his book. Dr. Schlafkin, who is head of NIH, liked the word. Those 3 phrases, tooth-conserving dentistry, advanced adhesive dentistry, biomimetic, which should we use on this conference? Going to be, we'll say, an international conference. Most of our doctors will come from the United States and Canada, but this conference had to have a name. And we had to have, in our view, kind of a catchy name, like would say, well, what the heck is that? So dentists invited to a conference on advanced adhesive dentistry, every dentist is like, oh, I already do advanced adhesive dentistry because I've been trained by this key opinion leader, this mentor from this company, blah, blah, blah. And the same problem with tooth-conserving dentistry. Every dentist thinks they're tooth-conserving dentistry if they're doing root canals. If they're doing fillings or doing crowns or conserving tooth structure. Tooth-conserving dentistry didn't really tie in with this idea that the science was advancing in adhesive dentistry. So we decided to use biomimetic, mainly because dentists had no idea what that meant. And so when Pascal and I were talking about how it works and how we promote biomimetic dentistry, we said you have to have 3 things. You have to have the knowledge, you have to have the ability to practice, and you have to have the ability to be on stage. In other words, once you start going on stage, you've got to give up either your scientific foundation, which takes time and dedication on a daily basis, or you have to give up your private practice, which takes time and dedication on a daily basis. And so you can't do all three of those. I mean, in the Alleman Center, in our business, we have science, we have practice, and we have some pretty good stage presentations. But in reality, there are things that I teach in the 6 lessons to the 500 or 1,000 doctors that I've trained over the last 25 years that if you don't know in detail, you are not going to be able to have the success that the doctors who have a mastership knowledge have. But the product that we sell in 6 lessons is not a material. We recommend materials, but we can make any materials from any company work with the right techniques. But in reality, you have to identify, and this is what I've always done, who are the leaders in the science, in the 6 lessons approach that the Alleman Center has been teaching now for 25 years, over 25 years. We're having the success that we envisioned. And this success is that we've trained enough teachers of the 6 lessons approach who are teaching internationally around the world. Last 2 days, Davey and I have given 2-hour lectures to a group of 19 dentists in South America, translated into Spanish by Geraldo, very wonderful translator. But all of these efforts have one purpose. We're just trying to save teeth and make dental treatments as successful as possible, because that's what patients want. And so if you're interested in doing the type of dentistry that your patients really want, then click on the link below. I don't know. Audrey can audit this to make sure that you understand that you have other places to get more information about the 6 lessons approach. And until episode 9, get bonded, stay bonded.